Hello and welcome to Wales Today. The headlines. 3 more local authority areas are in lockdown this evening. It means 2/3 of the Welsh population are now living under tighter restrictions.
We do have to collect 2 of the grandchildren from school once a week in Bridgend, so we're counting that as an essential trip.
It means that we will either have to meet up outside. It's very sad to think that this lockdown has come.
Face-to-face teaching is suspended at Aberystwyth University after a number of students test positive for COVID-19. It all comes as the Economy Minister pledges £140 million to help businesses cope and recover after the pandemic. Also tonight, Brian has a health condition and spent months shielding earlier this year. He says he's staying home once again to keep himself safe. Damaged by Storm Ciara, the Conwy Valley railway line reopens after a multi-million-pound rebuild.
And in tonight's sport, what future for football without the fans? As Newport County prepare for a cup tie in an empty stadium, a warning tonight that without financial help, only Premier League clubs may survive.
Good evening, noswaith chi. In the past half an hour, 3 more areas of Wales have gone back into lockdown. It means that almost 2 million people have now had more restrictions placed on their everyday lives. Half of Wales' local authorities have seen tougher rules imposed. Neath Talbot, Torfaen and the Vale of Glamorgan being the latest. Carmarthenshire in the west is still on a watch list. That's despite the tougher rules seen in Llanelli already. And most counties in North Wales are also being closely monitored. Well, let's get the very latest now from our reporter, Nicola Smith.
From valley to coast, cities to rural communities, so many people's lives in Wales are changing all over again. Local restrictions affecting families, businesses, livelihoods.
So if you're now living in lockdown, there are some really specific rules for you to follow. You shouldn't leave your area without a reasonable excuse, like going to work, to school, to give care, or to buy food. You shouldn't meet up with anyone you don't live with indoors, and overnight stays are banned. And you shouldn't go on holiday.
Meeting up outdoors is still allowed, and plenty were enjoying a walk and a catch-up in Penarth this afternoon. It's one of the areas now in lockdown. But for Anne and Naomi, it's the rules on indoor meetings that are affecting them most.
We can't go for a meal with my son and my grandchildren. It means that we will either have to meet up outside. It's very sad.
We do have to collect 2 of the grandchildren from school once a week in Bridgend, so we're counting that as an essential trip, but only to drop them to the door when their mum comes home from work.
And like so many other children, baby 7 will be seeing much less of his grandparents.
My mum used to have him every Friday, but can't now.
We're lucky that we're self-employed, so we can work. We time it around each other, so one of them has him. But it just means if we want a baby-free day, we can't have one, unfortunately. But it's okay. It is what it is.
And with businesses struggling throughout this pandemic, the Welsh Government's announced funding to help out. £80 million for firms' post-COVID recovery plans and £60 million to help businesses now in local lockdown.
Grants of £1,500 will be available to retail, leisure and hospitality businesses with a rateable value of between £12,001 and £51,000 that have seen a material impact on their businesses as a result of local restrictions. Grants of £1,000 will be available to small businesses with a rateable value of £12,000 or less.
So shops and cafes here in Neath will of course be able to apply. And Keith told us for him, that's good news.
Be a massive difference because it could pay for more staff and just generally pay for the bills.
Down the street, Susan is not so sure.
It'll help with a little bit of contribution to just the rent, but I don't think it's going to make a big dent in the problems that we've got at the moment. With footfall, getting people back into town, it's going to be difficult.
Today's figures show there were 286 new cases in Wales, with no further deaths. Hardest hit is Blaen y Gwent. It has one of the smallest populations, but now the highest case rate in the UK. Everyone's watching the numbers, and at Aberystwyth University, with a number of students testing positive, they've decided to stop all in-person teaching. That affects first-year friends Ansa, Gabrielle and Rachel.
I understand why it has to happen, but also I think I have my own issues with it because I can't go home because Cardiff's in lockdown and I can't exactly go to the university to do my sessions. So I'm basically paying to do my degree on Microsoft Teams.
And tonight, Ceredigion Council has announced all their leisure centres, pools and facilities will close as a precaution. Local lockdown or not, coronavirus is still affecting us all.
Well, let's go over now to one of those areas that has just gone into lockdown. Our reporter Nellie Bird is in Torfaen. Nellie.
Well, believe it or not, it was just 3 weeks ago today that we brought you the news that Caerphilly was going into a local lockdown. That was a first, of course, but so much has changed in those last few weeks. And here we are this evening with 2/3 of the Welsh population under local restrictions, including here in Torfaen, where we are this evening. Let's speak to the leader of the local council, Anthony Hunt, who's with us this evening. Hello, thanks for joining us. We mentioned Caerphilly there. I think many people may have thought, you know, a neighbouring authority, it was an inevitability that eventually Torfaen would be put into this sort of measures.
Well, nobody wants to be in a situation like this or to have to put in place measures like this, but we felt, looking at the evidence, alongside the experts, alongside Welsh Government, it was the right thing to do for public health in order to protect people and to protect public health in the longer term.
The geography of the county is such that there are these counties all around really that have already been put into local lockdowns. Blaen y Gwent is one that stands out. The rate has rocketed there over the last few days. How do you feel about that? There is the border. People will still move across that for work and things like that.
Well, that's very concerning because we want to help protect our people wherever they live or work, and we need to work together, I think, to try and bring these rates down.
Yeah. I mean, realistically then, looking at the regulations, what will happen? How can they be policed, especially the one about, you know, people not meeting indoors?
Well, I think the vast majority of people are sensible. They want to protect those closest to them, and they'll follow the guidelines. They realise, I think, that the more we follow the guidelines together, the more we pull together, the quicker we can come out of measures like this, and the fewer people have to suffer at the hands of this awful virus.
Yeah, and in the sense of how long they could go on, have you got any idea?
Well, it's pointless to try and speculate, but certainly the more we can take these regulations to heart, the quicker we can hopefully turn around those figures, like we've started to see in places like Caerphilly now, and then we can hopefully come out the other side and be in a situation where we don't have to have such regulations, because I know they're a pain for people.
OK, Anthony Hunt, thank you so much for joining us. So a huge chunk of Wales under new restrictions this evening. The problem is, as Anthony Hunt said there, it's just not clear how long they could go on.
OK, Nellie Bird in Torfaen, thank you very much. Well, there haven't been any local measures taken in North Wales yet. Our reporter Matthew Richards is in Llandudno for us. Matthew.
Thanks very much, Jen. Well, yeah, the Welsh Government is hoping that North Wales can avoid these local lockdowns, but as things stand, 5 out of the 6 counties here are on that Public Health Wales amber watch list. That's one just below the tighter restrictions. And Gwynedd is the only county currently that's not on that list. Conwy County, where we are today, has the highest rate of cases, and Wrexham was added today. People will remember that back at the end of July, there were quite a high number of cases in Wrexham, and that caused concern. But today, Ken Skates, the Economy Minister, said that the rapid test and trace system that was implemented there locally had quite an effect on reducing the number of cases there, and he's hopeful that that can be replicated across North Wales. He's speaking to leaders of all the North Wales councils to get across the situation. But he's also saying that anecdotally people do seem to be following the guidance and taking precautions where possible. He said even where there aren't lockdowns in place, people should ask themselves not just what they can and can't do, but what they should and shouldn't do. Public Health Wales says it's monitoring these areas of concern, but says cases are rising across Wales and nobody in any area can afford to be complacent.
Matthew Richards from Llandudno, thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by our political editor, Felicity Evans. And Fliss, most of us in Wales now living under local restrictions. Will the focus turn perhaps to people who are living alone.
Yes, I think that's already starting to happen, Jen, because, as you say, most of us now affected by these restrictions, and these local restrictions mean that extended households have been suspended. So the only people you can socialise indoors with are the people you live with. And if you don't live with anybody, that's very isolating, isn't it? And one public health expert has called for a more compassionate approach towards people who live alone. The First Minister, Mark Drakeford, has expressed his sympathy with that view, and he said he's considering measures that might help there, looking specifically at the Scottish model, which allows people who live alone to form an extended household with one other household. The Welsh Conservatives have urged the First Minister to take action on that immediately and not to wait for a review. And Plaid Cymru too say the Welsh Government should look at every possibility to safely ensure that people who live alone can see other people.
And we've heard about some extra funding for businesses from Ken Skates, the Economy Minister. What's been the reaction to that?
Yeah, we have. So Mr Skates saying that the Welsh Government has got the most comprehensive package of business support of all the UK nations. He announced more for businesses today, as we heard in Nicky's package a little bit earlier. But he said he didn't have the firepower to save every single job. Now, that prompted Plaid Cymru to say the Welsh Government should be pushing for further powers, particularly on borrowing, to give them more room for manoeuvre. And for the Welsh Conservatives, they say that the Treasury has been propping up much of the Welsh economy with the furlough scheme and now the job support scheme, as well as giving billions in extra funding to the Welsh Government.
OK, Felicity, thank you for that update. You're watching Wales Today, still to come from the BBC before 7 o'clock. The first train on the Conwy Valley Railway line since February has taken months and more than £2 million to repair flood damage.
And Cardiff was the warmest place in the UK yesterday, but all changed today with some drizzly rain and mist. Sunnier again tomorrow, but how long will it last? Join me later to find out.
Thousands of people across Wales were asked to shield during the first few months of the pandemic, taking the most extreme measures to keep themselves safe. Shielding ended in August, but as COVID-19 cases have been rising, some of those most vulnerable to the virus have decided to return to similar measures. Ben Price has more.
Treharris in the Merthyr County Borough has been in lockdown for the past week, although little has changed for Brian and Kath Yoxall. They've been taking extra care all along due to Brian's serious respiratory conditions, which make him vulnerable to the virus. He spent the first few months of the pandemic shielding.
I just didn't go out to mix with people. I stopped going to my local club. I stopped shopping because we used to order things online, or my son used to go. And then after how many weeks?
Oh, a long time.
Long time.
About 3 months into it.
If my son couldn't go shopping, my wife would go shopping.
Since shielding was eased, they were able to see their family again. But now, as cases creep up and lockdowns return, they hardly leave the house and can't see their grandchildren properly.
We looked after them when their parents are working, but luckily enough, my daughter-in-law works from home now, so she's there to see to take them to school and fetch them. But that's the worst for us, I think, is not being able to hold them and giving them a cuddle, isn't it?
In the next county over, in the Caerphilly Borough, 15-year-old Joshua is starting his GCSEs at home. His sister Lucy also had a shielding letter earlier in the pandemic because of a series of very complex health needs. Given the local lockdown and cases reported in a number of schools, the family has decided to shield once again.
It's not a difficult decision, because I feel that Lucy's health is priority. Even though Josh needs his education, health is priority.
130,000 people in Wales received a letter instructing them to go into shielding at the start of this pandemic. But now the Welsh Government says it's unlikely to ask people to do that again, despite an increase in cases and a number of local lockdowns. One health-focused charity told me it's satisfied with the current measures in place.
If things got really, really bad, we would advocate shielding being introduced, but we're a long way from that at this moment in time. We know that even before coronavirus, people with very severe lung conditions would shield as a matter of course during the flu season anyway. It was when they did. So people are accustomed to looking after themselves.
The Oxalls know what they need to do to protect Brian. They say they hope everyone else can continue to follow the guidance to help keep the most vulnerable safe.
Ben Price reporting there. Parents affected by serious failings in maternity units at Cwm Taf University Health Board will hear the findings of an independent investigation this autumn. 10 more cases at units run by the Health Board have been found by a review, bringing the total number to 160. Maternity services at hospitals in Merthyr Tydfil and Llantrisant were placed in special measures last year. The latest report has said services are coping remarkably well despite the coronavirus pandemic. A total of 8 people have been arrested following raids in Wrexham as part of an operation to break up an organised crime group suspected of dealing Class A drugs in the town. North Wales police say 7 men and 1 woman are currently in custody. A cleaner who stole £93,000 from an elderly woman she befriended has been jailed for more than 2 years. Fiona Louise Harwood from Neyland admitted 3 charges of fraud at Swansea Crown Court. She had withdrawn nearly £19,000 from cash points and transferred another £50,000 from her victim's bank account. The Conwy Valley Line has reopened today after flood damage cost more than £2 million to repair. The railway from Llandudno Junction to Blaenau Ffestiniog has been closed for more months than it's been open since the start of 2019. The latest damage was caused by Storm Ciara in February. Here's Chris Deedon.
The train now standing on platform 1 is the first one since early February. For the last 7.5 months, anyone travelling between Llandudno Junction and Blaenau Ffestiniog has had to go by bus. In February this year, floodwaters surged through this part of the Conwy Valley once again, washing away the embankment that the railway's built on and leaving the tracks hanging like a ladder in mid-air. It's cost £2.2 million to put the railway back together, but that's included extra defences in the hope of preventing flood damage like that in the future.
From Llanrwst to Talacavern, for example, we've had 16,000 tonnes of rock armour to reinforce the line and make it more resilient and give confidence back to our passengers that we will be open for business. And if we do have another storm again, we won't be off for months, fingers crossed. It'll just be a matter of days or weeks now.
And people living in the Conwy Valley will know exactly why. Flooding closed the line in 2019 as well, and in 2016, and 2005, and 2004. Since the start of last year, the railway has now been shut more than it's been open. It's deprived the Conwy Valley of an important community link.
I grew up alongside the line in Glan Conwy, so I'm pretty familiar with it. Yeah, indeed, it's a very important link through from the coastal area through to Blaenau Ffestiniog and back, and joining the communities in between.
And there are still a few issues to be dealt with before a full service can be restored. Last time the railway reopened after flood damage, it lasted 6 months before the next storm hit. This time, engineers say the line survived Storm Francis in August unscathed, giving them some hope for the future.
Well, as you may have noticed already, Wales Today looks a little different tonight. This morning we said goodbye to the old broadcasting house in Llandaf in the north of Cardiff after more than 50 years and moved swiftly into Central Square Studios right here in the heart of the capital. And Nick Savini is in another part of our new building to tell us more.
Jen, thanks very much indeed. Well, it's a new era, isn't it, for Wales Today and indeed for BBC Wales in this very striking, high-tech city centre location. But the backdrop is equally striking as well, isn't it? This is a major investment of licence fee payers' money at a very difficult time. But we believe the technology in this building will allow us to tell stories in a better way. And of course, for the foreseeable future, that means telling the story of COVID. But you know, when work started on this project some years ago now, no one could have foreseen we'd be in the middle of a global pandemic now.
Long standby, Rebecca. 1 minute to air. 1 minute to air.
A day like no other for Wales Today. Appropriately, it began with one of our most experienced presenters, Rebecca John, reading the final bulletin at our old HQ in Llandudno. After more than 50 years, the last news to come from the famous old building.
From all of us here at BBC Wales, thank you for watching and listening. Goodbye, hwyl fawr.
So to Central Square in the middle of Cardiff. Work started here in 2015 at a cost of £100 million. It's created one of the most advanced broadcast centres in Europe. And the moment, years in the making, finally got underway when the first Wales Today broadcast was aired at lunchtime. Have a good afternoon. So this is the view you'll be used to. Let me give you a view now of the studio that you're probably very unlikely to see again. And the most striking feature of this is that these cameras are not operated by any humans at all. They're fully automated and they move around in front of these 3 huge high-definition screens that make up the walls. Now, the bit that you do see, of course, is the newsroom, where it's all put together. And the studio just sits behind the main newsroom. But the BBC is like just about every other employer out there at the moment. Social distancing rules and the fact that so many people are working from home means that this place is nothing like as busy as you would have expected it to be. It may all prove an impressive backdrop, but what do the viewers get out of it all?
Well, I think the first thing you'll see is a major difference in terms of the quality of the programming we're putting out. You know, people are watching in HD tonight, and that is a big shift. High definition, long after we should have had it, but at last our programmes are going out in high definition. On radio and television and online, the technical foundations here will last us 20 to 30 years. So this isn't just an investment for now, this is an investment for generations to come. And it says how important Wales is to the whole BBC.
And is this value for money for licence fee payers across Wales, do you think?
It's terrific value for money. This is half the size of Cardiff. We've thought about every detail of this building in terms of how we make it as efficient as possible.
The other big impact of the pandemic has been outside. Sitting halfway between Cardiff Central train station and the Principality Stadium the other side, it's hard to think of a more high-profile location anywhere in Wales. The idea was to be right at the heart of a thriving, bustling city centre. Well, COVID's put pay to that, for the time being at least. An exciting time then for Wales Today, but a new beginning, certainly at an extraordinary time.
Nick Savini showing you around our new home here in Central Square. Well, Thomas is here now with the sport, and Thomas, some dire warnings about football without fans.
Yes, without financial help, the future of the game is at stake. That's the warning tonight from Newport County's chairman. With fans unlikely to return for at least 6 months, Gavin Foxall says only Premier League clubs may survive, and the game desperately needs a rescue package. It comes as prominent figures in the game are warning football's National League structure is now at risk of collapse. This place should be busy. A cup tie against Premier League opposition on Wednesday would have filled the stadium, 7,500 tickets sold. Not having fans means Newport County has missed out on around £500,000 in one cup run alone.
It was planned that we didn't think we'd see fans until January in the new year in any event. But with the decision that the UK government made the other day, looking likely that's not going to be in the spring, so we've had to reevaluate that accordingly. And of course it has a financial impact on the club.
All but 3 of the club's 100 staff were furloughed this year. The chairman told me he's hopeful financial help is coming. Without it, he says, the league structure may disappear.
That help really can only come from the wider football community and also from UK government, because I think it's really important to do that for the future of the game at all that level. Otherwise, what we'll probably just see is Premier League, and I don't think that is what football needs. Like any supply chain, and we are a supply chain, etc., you've got to look after your pyramid, and we are part of that pyramid.
Newport normally bring in a total of £2.2 million every year. Around £900,000 comes from fans attending matches. That's tickets and hospitality, accounting for 40% of the club's income. It's an average of 30% for clubs in the Championship, where Swansea and Cardiff play.
Fortunate at football clubs to have wealthy owners, but pockets only run so deep, with money, when they're running other businesses that might struggle as well. Spain aren't going to do that before Christmas, that's for sure. Are we going to get them back this season? Until we find a vaccine, I think it's going to be very difficult.
There's mounting concern from all major sports. Half of the Welsh Rugby Union's money, around £45 million, comes from events at the Principality Stadium. Ice hockey season never started. It's not financially viable for the Cardiff Devils without crowds. And the wait to welcome paying punters back at the country's horse racing tracks goes on. And tonight, the starkest warning yet. Not only football clubs at risk, but the entire league pyramid may collapse if help isn't forthcoming. After 3 years at Cardiff City, Callum Patterson is on his way to Sheffield Wednesday. The Scotland international wasn't involved in the defeat against Reading on Saturday. They went down 2-1. That's their second defeat at home this season. Head coach Steve Cooper says Swansea City must strengthen their squad if they're serious about repeating last season's promotion efforts. The Swans remain unbeaten after a 2-0 win at Wickham. Andre Ayew and Jamal Lowe with the goals. History was made in the Welsh Premier Women's League at the weekend when Swansea faced Cardiff. It was the first women's domestic match in Wales to be televised live. The Swans started the defence of their title with a 3-0 win against their rivals. Shauna Jenkins volleyed them ahead inside the opening 2 minutes. Stacey John Davis got the second before this from Chloe Chivers. Let's get a full check on the weather forecast for Wales. Derek is with us tonight.
Thanks very much, Thomas. Well, after yesterday's glorious September sunshine, it was all change today. Tomorrow will be nicer, but make the most of it. There is more unsettled weather on the horizon. Now, today started off with a beautiful sunrise. This picture taken by Ken in Halkin in Flintshire, but a different story in Amroth in Pembrokeshire. Grey, damp and misty there this afternoon. Now, the grey, damp and murky weather will clear away through this evening, so it's an improving picture overnight. 1 or 2 showers rolling into parts of Gwynedd and Conwy. Otherwise, it will end up dry and clearer. Not as cold as last night, but still chilly. A few mist and fog patches forming in Powys. Now, tomorrow is Michaelmas Day, traditionally the last day of the harvest season, and we are in for a much nicer day. 1 or 2 isolated showers. Otherwise, it's looking dry, bright, with some spells of sunshine and pleasantly warm in the afternoon. The top temperature around 17 Celsius. Just a light breeze. Now it's all change again on Wednesday with a trough of low pressure moving eastwards across the UK. So the brolly will come in handy on Wednesday. Rain will spread from the west. Some of this rain will be heavy with stronger winds, and that will make it feel on the cool side. Better again on Thursday, dry and brighter, 1 or 2 showers. There'll be some sunshine, the wind lighter as well, and then some rain will reach the south later in the day. It's looking more unsettled for Friday and the weekend, showers and longer spells of rain and feeling on the chilly side. That's it. Back to Jen.
Derek, diolch. And that is Wales Today. I hope you can join us for the headlines at 10:30. But for now, from all of us on the programme, thanks for your company and do have a good evening. Bye-bye.